Welcome to another episode of Women in Family Business. We are WIFB, the global initiative for women to share their stories and expertise on matters related to the family enterprise. What if the secret to resilient leadership isn't power, but belonging? Kim Samuel knows this isn't just a philosophical question. As a fifth-generation steward of a family enterprise and the founder of the Belonging Forum, she spent her life uncovering how belonging, or its absence, shapes families, businesses, and societies. Her journey began with a family crisis that revealed a harsh truth. Even in a family business, where the name is on the door, loneliness and isolation can thrive. That realization ignited her mission to redefine belonging as a birthright, a strategic imperative, and a radical act of leadership. Kim's insights are urgent, practical, and deeply human, whether you're navigating a family enterprise, leading a team, or simply asking how we should show up for each other. This conversation will challenge you to lead with belonging or risk leaving potential and people behind. Enjoy this episode with Kim. Kim, I'm so excited. We're going to be diving into your expertise around social isolation, belonging, and we're going to flavor it with a little bit of family enterprise legacy, which is your background as well. It feels like the right time in, dare I say, history to be talking about these subjects in more depth. So it would be wonderful for us, Kim, to sort of like understand where your passion for the topic of belonging and sort of like fighting social isolation even came from to begin with, because I know that there's a personal moment in your life that kind of led you to that moment. If you wouldn't mind sharing that with us.
I will take you back to 1997. And at the very beginning of that year, my father, my late father, Ernie Samuel, had a severe brain injury out of the blue, at least as far as any of us know. And he was then in a coma for 3 months. It's important to note that that was around the time when MRIs were still quite new. When he woke up, and there was no guarantee that he would, about 3 months after being in a coma, it was a miracle for us that we had him back. We also knew, and he knew, that he had acquired a lot of disabilities, physical disabilities, cognitive disabilities, and so on. But I think you'll know what I mean when I say he was still him, and we knew that. Well, one of the first things that was required was to get him into rehabilitation. And we hit a roadblock. The roadblock was that my dad had just turned 65. The insurance company came back and said, oh, no, he's in his sundown years, meaning 65. Therefore, there is no provision for rehabilitation. So we, as a family, we were blessed mostly because we had him back, but also we could afford to get him to a top place for rehabilitation. We're from Canada, as I think you know, but the best place that we heard about and knew about was in Chicago. And so my dad got to go to rehabilitation, and that went very, very well. But I also became aware for the first time of what ageism is. So that was the first point. The second point was really when my father went home back to Canada after the rehabilitation. And he now was a person with a lot of disabilities, and he was using a wheelchair. So there we are home. And this is when I got to become so aware of the way people are made less than, treated as less than. Even people who were his friends, really his friends, they didn't know what to do because we don't teach people what to do. And so if you don't know what to do, sometimes you just back away. And even trying to get into buildings that were supposed to have universal design that would be accessible to all, and they're not. But I thought, well, it's not because my dad has disabilities that he's being treated this way. It's because of the way disabilities are being perceived in society, as that's somehow less, of all different kinds. Then I thought about poverty in its many different forms. And I thought, gosh, people are put down or treated as the other, not because of the poverty they are experiencing. It's because of the way they are treated, because of the poverty there. And then we can go into most anything else. We can go into LGBTQIT people. We could go into just being a woman. We could go into what happens in the workplace. We could go into forced migrants, asylum seekers. We could go anywhere. And it's something, honestly, that I see myself working on until my last breath, or as close to it as I can come, because this is my passion. And then moving around the world a bit and moving to about 2002, I was introduced to Nelson Mandela. Completely different context. It was more
Okay.
related to my
That
work.
story
I
took a
know.
turn. I like it.
I'm not great on the segues. Um,
As segues
and
go, like,
yeah,
this one, yeah, nice.
yeah. And even just to meet him was an incredible honor. But I also got to have a bit of a conversation. And I asked him about isolation. And I asked if he had been isolated. Did he feel isolated? Of course, you would know all about that from being at Robben Island, where, as you know, he spent 19 years out of a total of 26 years incarcerated. And he said, no, no, I've never been isolated. And I recovered as quick as I could, thinking things were going so well. And now, like, what's happened? But got to think of a new question. And I said, not even in Robben Island? And he said, no, because in Robben Island, we were all brothers working together with a common purpose. I was never alone. He then went on to say that he had seen isolation in a child in a village in Africa with no love and food and housing and care and on and on. He said, I've seen isolation and it is very bad. And putting those two statements together, that was kind of a moment. It wasn't a moment of, oh, wow, I need to make a speech about this. It was not like that. It was the fact that he had been in the harshest conditions, cut off in a big way physically from everyone, from the world. And yet he knew that he was connected and that there was a purpose. And so it just quietly hit me, thinking, oh, well, okay, so this is what I'm going to be working on for the rest of my life. It was like that. And so now what's for dinner? I mean, it was really just like that.
The first thing that I thought when I learned about what you're doing, Kim, was I thought how much we take belonging for granted in a family business context, because it almost feels like telling someone that they feel isolated or lonely when they have a place where literally the name is on the door. You know what I mean? Like, you have family members around you all the time. I mean, we know it can be toxic, but so it feels like that setting should be the opposite of loneliness and isolation. I'd love to explore this with you. Like, do you think we take a sense of belonging too much for granted in like something like a family legacy, family enterprise space? Or like, is it the same like with Nelson Mandela, where we assumed he was isolated when he was actually not? What do you think?
I would say yes. Yes to the question. Maybe it's not as much taking it for granted as it is feeling really disappointed when it isn't just there. I'm part of a family business that was founded in 1855 in a country, Canada, that was founded in 1867. So I don't ever remember a time not knowing that we had a family business that we were really proud of, and that even as little kids, that this was part of our family. There were no words like legacy or no words of this responsibility. It was just, wow, this is really important to our family. And my dad gets up really early, and even when there's a snowstorm and no one else turns up, he'll be driving into the company, and these kinds of things that still inspire me today. Belonging wasn't really something that was articulated, and even now I see the word everywhere, but I think it's important that we consider, what do we mean by belonging? And so for me, belonging only works if everybody belongs. And I've written about belonging and research about belonging and kind of live belonging. And on the other side, isolation and loneliness and deprivations and human rights. And it all comes in together for a long time. So the belonging, I construct belonging and see belonging as a birthright that we all share by simple virtue of the fact that we are born. And that can sound sort of like, I still get it's usually this shoulder. I don't know why, kind of it. Isn't that nice? You care about people. Well, as it turns out, I do care about people. But what I'm talking about is what happens when we kind of forget about belonging. And that's my word. There could be another word. And certainly in other languages, there will be many, many other words. But it's the fact that if you don't have the chance to get a birth certificate, to go to school, to have health care, to have all these basic rights, I put them all into belonging. Then it's pretty hard to have a community, a society, a place that you might, even your home, that you feel this strong sense of this is tied up in me. And I put it into our connection to people, to each other. People need to know their roles, but it goes back to belonging. And everyone I'm going to say in an enterprise of any kind, they are equally important. They are equally important.
I personally am quite fond of the word belonging because I think it has a kindness to it that I think we can all sense and feel as a need in us. And I'm wondering how you see this, sort of like how frameworks come into this, like, how people can actually intentionally say, like, well, we don't have that, whether we're a family enterprise or not, or any kind of other organization or group of people intending to do something together. Can it be fostered? And if yes, what are the things we need to do as individuals?
I think it starts, if I could start with, this is not a nice to have. And I think that's how you feel too. Just because something sounds that there's a softness to it. I love that there's a softness to the word belonging. Yeah. And at the same time, when we look at the harshness of our world today that lacks belonging for so many people, and isolation, yes, loneliness, yes, but also agency and choice and voice over the systems that govern us, to the point where we're even, rightly so, questioning the systems that govern us, or what is truth and what is not coming at us. It's really confusing. So I would say the first is we can come up with other words that I love. Kindness. Kindness is, all of them, they are in their own domain, whether it's a domain of faith or maybe just about faith in each other. And at the same time, I believe underlying it is, how do we affect and make better policies democratically, representing people whose voices have had direct input into the dialogues. So then it becomes really important. Maybe we could look at what the costs are of not honoring belonging. Belonging, it's in everywhere. Down the hill from my house in Toronto is a cafe called the Belong Cafe. I mean, belonging is everywhere. So what does that mean? Does that mean anyone could come here? Does that mean if we invite a new member on a board because we really, wanted someone from this sector or this gender or this, and we should want everyone from all genders, sectors, perspectives, especially if I could say more people with disabilities on boards. With that knowledge, then you've got the person, I'm giving you a board table, it could be any table, and that person comes in and they take their seat at the table, and they're kind of heard, but there's no pickup. They don't belong. And when I look at another part of your question, if I can just put in a new term, which is not belonging. You can choose not to belong. You can choose not to conform. We have to also think about everything is relational. So what I do for me as an individual, because human rights are all individuals, that's true, but everyone else is an individual. So we can't just run reckless over people's lives. And I feel that there's so many more really bad indicators, including young people and mental health. And is that there's fabric is being torn away, and so we can't choose to deny someone else their belonging.
The first thing that came to mind when you started answering the last question for me was like, how often belonging is taken away as a form of punishment to coerce people into doing what they don't want to do. That's why I love the fact that you're saying not belonging is an option as well, and that not belonging does not have to result in loneliness necessarily. It's not the same thing.
Not belonging can result in somebody's connection to people, place, power, purpose, and knowing who they are.
Can you talk to me a little bit through how social media and phenomena like just generally the internet, I would say, have influenced the definition of belonging, and where this discussion is going to lead this discussion?
Well, I was asked recently about technology in a way as if, are you for it, against it? Because of talking about some of the technologies that you mentioned. And of course, I'm for technology, but I'm also for responsible use of technology. And I'm also very much for evidence-based scientific research that continues to show real risk and real damage, especially to younger people, to young people. There's a center as a maybe a point of interest at Harvard University called the Digital Wellness Lab, headed by a psychiatrist and maybe the kindest, most empathic man, and called Dr. Michael Rich. And they research and also treat a lot of people around 14 years old who have become so reliant on some of these forms of media, and to I think this is really scary, to AI chat boxes helping a young person through the decision and acting on the decision to take their own lives. Could you ever imagine such a thing that could happen? And so I think about, there's a lot of really good uses for the kind of technologies. There's affinity groups. There's people that communicate that couldn't communicate otherwise. There's also a lot of people who have no access to a smartphone. And at the same time, I think about what else could we be doing when we're not sitting at a computer screen? For kids, maybe we could get them out playing a bit more. Maybe we could get them into reading more. And I don't mean to sound like I'm on a soapbox, and I probably do. It's just there needs to be a balance.
I think there's a shadow side and a light side to the belonging conversation. The family enterprise isn't there. Now, I see, like, you defined from the beginning of this conversation, you defined the family enterprise the way your dad did and the way your family seems to, which encompasses everybody, encompasses every employee's family even. So I think that definition of a family enterprise I think it's the most positive way of doing it, right? Like, it's sort of like, even if there might not be financial ownership, there's definitely psychological ownership, and there's an accountability for everyone. And that will, I think everyone can imagine that a space like that will create a sense of belonging very naturally, right? Like, so, but I also think that the shadow side of it in the family enterprise is when the sense of belonging only belongs to, say, the family, first of all. And even within that family, that it's being used to force, say, next generation members into a mold, and to use it almost like a currency. This is the currency you have to pay in order to belong to the legacy. And that worries me sometimes as well, Kim, right? Like that it's being used as a leverage in that sense. I don't know, have you come across this? Like, how do you see that?
That really resonates. I actually write about the shadow side of belonging is something that looks like belonging, but it's denying someone else their belonging and ultimately that person, and it looks like a choice. But I think there's other kind of shadows and other kinds of where's the light. As a woman, I had a different experience. I didn't feel any pressure to go into the family business, and that even made me sad.
Right, because there was no expectation either.
I thought, well, there's no pressure for me to be in business. And I just love being part of my family. I love my family. But I was really sad because there was no, I felt like I really had to go prove myself at something else. And with my brother Mark, I don't think there was ever an expectation that he would not go into the family business. But I do want to say, because I think some of this is still relevant, and when I say my day, oh, it's still my day, but I'd hear this, oh, well, the men go into the business and the girls run the foundation. And that's doing a real disservice to those who are involved in nonprofit work, which is really running a business also just in slightly different outcomes, right? It's not about the money you make. And at the same time, you're watching investments and your ROI is in some ways even more important. That is giving people choices that look like choices, but they're not.
To give our listeners and viewers a bit of an outlook on what is on the agenda. So, like, there's been a rebrand, exciting. Belonging Forum, Belonging Lab is happening, and the new book is in the making. So, you said to me at the beginning of this conversation, this is what you're going to be talking about until your last breath, which hopefully is very far away. But what kind of shapes do you think this is further going to take? And like, what does impact look like for you in the years to come? Like, what are you really focused on?
The focus for me is next 5 years to have belonging be significant as a factor, not simply an over there thing when the economy's good, in businesses, in government, in civil society, and to remove silos and to have all kinds of people. Whoever wants to be involved should be involved, right? That's what a movement is, build this movement. And in terms of maybe just to give two specifics as to that, one is measurement. I really believe in the importance of measurement and as a tool. And we started 2 years ago. We're just we'll be announcing the results of the third iteration next month. And we started something called the Belonging Barometer. And the Belonging Barometer started in the UK, which is I'm a citizen of two countries, although my heart is in Canada. But we started this here and hope to take it to other countries. And it's looking at individuals in survey by constituency. It's divided by constituencies, all the constituencies in the UK. Our partner is a company called Opinium, and that they do polling. They hadn't done anything quite like this. So we can get everyone to speak up, and there's questions that they would be asked around belonging. I want to tell you, I should add before I tell you the other thing that's happening now is that in the next 5 years or sooner, I would like people to understand the difference, not a difference in significance between loneliness and social isolation and connection, which can be the agency and what happens to a whole group, and belonging, and to really do my very best to explain belonging and help identify so many others that can explain it in their way. So anyway, the Belonging Barometer has shown us things like demographically in terms of who feels the greatest lack of belonging, which is usually reported still as loneliness. But I can tell you there's a lot of different things that are going into this. Young women by a lot, 18 to 25 in particular. This is not to say that young men aren't struggling, but for young women, it's much, much higher. I think that's important to note. And older people. and people with disabilities. That none of these may come as a surprise, but I think it's important to look at why and where these answers are coming from, because they're not coming from simply socioeconomic data, privileged people, privileged communities. This is not what this is about. Again, belonging is everyone's right. Showing us that renters feel a lack of belonging much more so than people who own their own home. That's really significant when we see in so many countries that young people will, many will
Buying a
never
house is
be.
never going to be possible. Exactly. Absolutely.
Yeah. And then we see compounded with the effects of gentrification and people moving out, and losing community.
It's a real issue.
So I think it's really important to be asking the questions now. And what does community mean? Community and connectedness are not synonymous unless you work at it every day. Something that we're just starting, but I've had in my mind for a long time, which is the charter of belonging. What is a charter of belonging? Well, again, sometimes the straightforward things are the things that they're not the glitter and the lights in the sky. They're the things that we can all do every day. I feel we must, or we'll forget again. So it's to have a set of principles. 10 would be the most, I think. To look at what principles, what values can be articulated by most everyone. When I do it now, I want to do a lot more of it, going and meeting with communities on this, including through the belonging barometer, and go and meet with different people who ever wants to show up in a constituency and led by the member of parliament there. But it's everyone. It's not about political, because belonging should not be political. It is not. And get people's input. And it's amazing. And to do that wherever I go, my wish and hope and the doer in me is to make this really meaningful and useful. So those are two things, the barometer and the charter.